This lesson is all about fish, which are our first category of vertebrates. There are 4 objectives that go along with this section. First, I'd like you to be able to list the 4 common body parts of chordates. We talked about that on Monday as well, but I really want to review because it's a good launching point for where we're headed next. Next, I'd like you to be able to describe the 2 main characteristics of vertebrates, describe 4 traits that all fishes share, and describe the 3 classes of living fishes, giving an example of each one. So quickly to review chordates, there are 3 major groups of chordates that we'll be talking about or have talked about. First are vertebrates. This is our largest group. This is where we're going to spend the majority of our time for the rest of the year. There are also lancelets and tunicates. At some point in their lives, chordates have all 4 of these things in common. They're going to have a tail and a notochord. They don't always have to have a backbone or a well-developed head, but oftentimes they will when we get into the vertebrate category. All chordates are also going to have hollow nerve cords and pharyngeal gill slits. Vertebrates, the largest group of chordates, are animals that in addition to having that notochord, which is sort of like a support system, also have a backbone or have a backbone in addition to that. All vertebrates belong to the phylum Chordata, so they're commonly just called chordates. Here's a picture to show a little bit better those 4 characteristics of a chordate. There's a tail. Now, it's important to recall that for some chordates, like humans, that tail only exists in the embryo stage of development. So you're never going to see a baby born with a tail. The notochord in this instance is just a stiff, flexible rod that gives support. It's not protecting the nerve cord at this point in the same way. In a vertebrate, that is going to be replaced by a backbone that does protect the hollow nerve cord, which we see here in yellow running through our picture. In a vertebrate, it's not called a hollow nerve cord, it's called a spinal cord, and it connects to the brain. Pharyngeal gill slits, like you see here in the picture, are going to develop into gills. When we're talking about fish and other chordates, they will develop into other body parts. In humans and in other animals as well, the pharyngeal pouches or pharyngeal gill slits only exist during the embryo stage of development, so before the animal is born. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals are all vertebrates. That's what we're going to study for the rest of the year. Vertebrates are the only chordates that have a backbone. Remember that that is the strong but flexible column of vertebrae. Vertebrae are the single bones that you see like this picture here. When you put all of them together, they form a backbone. Vertebrates have well-developed heads to protect a skull, and those are going to be either made of bone or cartilage. Protection is one of the major functions of bone and the skeletal system, which you'll talk about probably next year. Now on to fish, our first category, of vertebrates. There are over 25,000 species of fish in the world, and a lot of them share characteristics in common. For instance, all fish are born to swim. They've been adapted, or their bodies are adapted to be able to swim. They have strong muscles that attach to their backbone that allow them to move their fins through the water. Fins are, remember, fan-shaped structures that act sort of like giant flippers to propel the fish through water. Fish also have scales, which both protect the body and lower friction. Just like when you rub your hand against your hand or a table or your leg, heat is produced and friction causes a loss of energy. There is also friction when a solid interacts with a liquid. Fish have well-developed nervous systems. They have a brain that keeps track of information that's coming from their sense organs. They have a number of sense organs in common with humans. For instance, they can hear, they can see, and they can smell. They also have a really neat structure called a lateral line, which is oftentimes very faintly visible on both sides of the fish's body, and it helps this fish to mark location and to detect vibrations in the water. So it sort of acts like a sense of touch, but it goes beyond just the sense of touch that you and I have. Fish are able to breathe through respiratory organs called gills. Gills work by taking water into the body. The oxygen is pulled out of the water and exchanged with carbon dioxide from the blood, and then that water is released back out into the fish's environment. There's a video, this video you see on the screen, that will be linked on my website for you to watch when you're done. Most fish reproduce through external fertilization. Now, this is always sexual reproduction at this point, so we have male and female genetic information being combined into a brand new organism. In external fertilization, the female lays unfertilized eggs in the water, and then the sperm swims over them and deposits the sperm. Some fish use internal fertilization as well, and that's where the sperm is deposited inside the female instead. Sometimes the female will lay the fertilized eggs that have the embryos inside, and in some cases the embryos will develop inside of the female. That's sort of how we think of reproduction as working in mammals. There are 5 different classes of fish in the world. 2 of them no longer are living. They're considered to be extinct, and so we'll focus on the 3 living classes of fish. Those are jawless fish, cartilaginous fish, and bony fish. There are 2 kinds of modern jawless fish, and these guys, in my opinion, are kind of gross. They're called hagfish and lampreys. So jawless fish are all going to be eel-like, meaning that they're smooth and slimy. They oftentimes will have round and jawless mouths, like the picture that you see on the screen. Instead of having skeletons made of bone, jawless fish will have skeletons that are made of cartilage. They also lack a backbone, so these guys technically aren't considered to be vertebrates. They have a notochord, however, so they are chordates. They have a skull, again, made out of cartilage. They have a brain, and they have eyes. Sometimes these guys are called the vultures of the sea because they oftentimes are going to suck nutrients out of other organisms. In honor of May 4th being this week, I don't know about you guys, but this reminds me of that creepy sand creature that was in the original movies. Our second group of fish that are still alive are cartilaginous fish. Sharks are probably the most common type of cartilaginous fish out there. These guys, instead of having skeletons of bone, also will have skeletons of cartilage, and that's never going to transition into bone like it does in lots of other vertebrates. Cartilaginous fish have fully functional jaws, despite the fact that they don't have that rigid bone holding their skeleton together. They're strong swimmers, and they're excellent predators. They're excellent predators in part because they have amazing senses of sight and smell. They use their lateral line very effectively to sense vibrations in the water. It helps them to hunt. They have to use oils that are stored in their liver and constant motion to stay alive and afloat. Sharks have to keep swimming at all times in order to keep water moving over their gills to breathe. They're not able to suck water in. It has to enter as they swim. And our third category of fish are bony fish. Now, 95% of the fish that we think of or that exist are bony fish. This is the largest category by far. They can range in size from being a small 1 centimeter long to being up to almost 9 meters in length. Remember that 1 centimeter is 100 meters, so everything from 1 centimeter to almost 900. Bony fish have skeletons made of bone. This is the first time we've seen that. So it's a stronger, more rigid support system. Their bodies are covered in scales. Remember that those help to reduce friction with the water. Unlike sharks, they can rest in one place and still keep water flowing over their gills to breathe. They don't have to be constantly swimming. And unlike sharks, instead of using oil in a swim bladder of sorts to stay afloat, they have a swim bladder that fills with gas, and it's used to control buoyancy. There are 2 main groups of bony fishes. We have our ray-finned fish, which have paired fins that are supported by thin rays of bone. Eels, herrings, trout, minnows, perch, a lot of the fish we think of oftentimes are ray-finned fish. But then there are also lobed-finned fish, and these guys have muscular and thick fins. There are 7 living species of lobed-finned fish currently around. 6 of them are lungfish. It means that they have air sacs and can breathe more like amphibians can, or you and I for that matter. And that is the end of our section. The homework for today that we'll be doing on Friday is to draw a diagram of a bony fish, since they make up the large percentage of our fish categories. The directions for that are posted on my website. There are also a lot of things I'd like you to remember and take away from this lesson. They're on the screen. You might want to pause the video and give those a read before you move on to your next thing.